right, and welcome to the new episode of Yogis on the Road. And today we have our first guest. Alexis, do you want to introduce our guest?
Sure. I met Laura. This is Laura Sutton Shanks. She is a student and a practitioner of yoga. She specializes in Ashtanga. I met her in India last year, and she had been on a very amazing journey. Laura, would you like to share a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. First off, thank you for having me, guys.
Yeah,
Of course.
Thank
It's
you.
really cool to be here. So I started practicing yoga asana about a little over 15 years ago, I would say. I
Cool.
was 14, and I was introduced to Bikram yoga from a dance teacher. I had been doing modern dance pretty regularly, and for flexibility, they'd recommended Bikram, so I started doing that twice a week. And I liked it, and I continued doing like yoga asana classes and Bikram and some vinyasa every once in a while, kind of on and off for the next 10 years. And I really had only ever thought of yoga as like stretching, and don't even think I knew any of the posture names. Like, nope, like nowhere did anyone ever say om or chant or do anything. Like I never thought of anything beyond like a physical
It's exercise.
Yeah. And even then, I was an athlete most of my life too. I didn't even think it was exercise. It's just like gentle stretching to me, you know?
Yeah.
So, it wasn't until about 4 years ago when I had a lot of kind of crazy life events happen. And I first picked up a copy of the Yoga Sutras. And that's when I was like, wow.
How'd you
wow.
find the sutras?
I had, there'd been a really rough year. My father had just been diagnosed with a rare terminal illness, and then a few months later, my brother was in a really bad accident, and he was in a coma for 2 years and almost died. Not 2 years, 2 months. Sorry, almost died, and it was really rough on me. And so I had helped take care of my family, for the better part of that year, and then eventually started traveling. And I ended up in Central America at my first ever yoga retreat. And a teacher there had really impacted me. He introduced me to Ram Dass and some other and Krishnamacharya and kind of all these big names. And while I was there, I literally signed up for a yoga teacher training course.
Amazing.
Cool.
And that started like 3 weeks later. And for the assignment, we had to read 4 chapters on freedom by Swami Satchidananda before the course started. So I read that version of the Yoga Sutras, and everything in it just made sense for the first time. And I really felt like that had been what had been missing from my life. And that's really when that was a pivotal point in my life.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you because, for instance, earlier I was talking like why I started or why Alexis started. It seems that all maybe the people that I've encountered started because something, quote unquote, like traumatic of like heavy impact happened to them. So isn't it interesting that like I was reading this in this Krishnananda book that it's not here, but it says that like life will put forward the obstacles or the challenges that you need. And if you step up to them, if you pass the test, quote unquote, then your life changes completely. You know what I'm saying? And it feels that maybe that happened for you, like you stepped up to the challenge that life put your way.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I like to say you get what you get when you need it.
Exactly.
And I think, especially with the philosophy aspect and maybe the more spiritual side of the practice, I even tell a lot of my students, listen, you guys, it took me maybe over 10 years worth of just doing physical movements before any of this like even started to register with me. When it's time, it'll happen. So
Exactly.
yeah, for sure.
So where do you teach? Where are your students?
So at the moment, I'm working with a school based in Greece, Alpha Yoga School. I've been teaching for 2 years in Goa, in India as well too. It was, like I said, it was really the philosophy, Indian philosophy and yoga philosophy that really registered with me the most. And so, like, when I say I started reading the Yoga Sutras 4 years ago, I literally did not stop after that.
Cool.
So I've really put a lot of time.
It
and
seems
effort
like it was that moment with that teacher where you were finally able to absorb all of this philosophy that was the turning point for you, where yoga became more than just a physical practice.
For sure. He was an amazing teacher. He was this guy from this was in Costa Rica, this guy in his 60s from California. He was like over 6 foot, like tall, skinny dude. He taught like everything. He'd been teaching a lot of Bikram, Vinyasa, and it was his yin classes that really got to me too. But he had also been the one that introduced me to Ashtanga. And he recommended that I start practicing Ashtanga. So this guy has no idea how much he impacted my life, but amazing.
So we had talked a little bit about getting the wisdom from a teacher. And I guess I'm curious, what was it about this person that made you trust him and take his words and his recommendations to heart?
That's a really good question.
She asked me the same question earlier, and it's like, how can you not? You cannot know.
His teacher is Lino Miele, and there's something about skilled teachers, and they kind of do something to you. And I guess I wonder how you would try to explain that.
I mean, even this guy, like, looking back, I've tried to go back and look him up, and I can't even find it. Like, I feel like it was like this like magical like experience.
You can't find him anymore. He just popped up.
It was, and he was so good. And I booked like a private session with him, and he showed up, and he was, and he's kind of influenced how I want to teach too. He showed up with a bag of books. I love books. So, and he kind of said, I recommend you read all these books. And the first thing I did was
his yoga class with you.
Yeah. And he gave me, just from having seen me in a few classes, he gave me kind of a vinyasa sequence to work with, that ended up being like really nice for my body as well too. He recommended I do a cleanse when I got back, and all these just very little things.
But so much more than just fitness.
Yeah, and the biggest part was he said to me at that time, and I had no desire to ever go to India. He said to me, "You're going to love India." And it was freaky, and I was like, okay. And then, less than a year later, I was in India, so he really, really saw,
You were there for 3 years, yeah?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was there for 3 weeks, and it like changed my life. 3 years is like, wow.
Yeah. I mean, I was, I do disclaimer, I was in, Goa for 2 of those years, and then Mysore, more of the sheltered parts of India. But it was a really, really awesome experience for me. India is a very magical place.
Super.
Yes, I'm sure so.
Yeah, but it also seems like your magic didn't begin in India. In fact, in a weird way, maybe your magic began when all of those terrible things happened in your life. Yeah,
it's really weird. The last course we had in Greece, I was thinking about this, and I don't want to say I'm not like happy any of these negative things happened, but if it wasn't for all of that, I had been going through a lot personally before all that too. Like I was a publicist in the fashion industry for 5 years. And I'd never been like content with it. Like I'd always felt something was not right. Yeah. I had suffered from depression, anxiety, issues with food, everything. Yeah. And I think it was all these kind of events that set greater change into motion in my life. And so I'm really grateful for all them. And it brought my family together too.
Yeah.
That's pretty incredible to me how an event can be interpreted in completely different ways. Like another you in a parallel universe could have said, why is this all happening to me? Life sucks. It's so bad. And yet you turned everything around, So the way you interpret an event usually, I think, informs the event itself.
Exactly. And for me, I think that's how I practice yoga off the mat. A lot of this is perspective. Last night at my mom's retirement party, my dad comes up to me and he's like, "It's so good to see you smiling." And I was like, "What do you mean? I always smile." He was like, "Laura, you didn't smile for like years. What do you mean?" And I think I had looked at everything from a negative perspective for so long. And the practice of yoga beyond asana has really taught me to start to see the positive. And it's that's really really had probably one of the biggest impacts on me. So
it takes the same effort when you guys think about it. It's like seeing something negative or positive. It's like you don't have to really make this big of a switch.
Yeah.
But it just changes everything.
Yeah. Maybe we can talk a little bit about samskara in the next segment. In the Yoga Sutras, there is a word samskara, and a samskara is an impression on your mind. It's like an imprint. So people can look at the world through a positive samskara or a negative samskara, but the yoga, you know, as in the sutra, yoga's chitta vritti nirodha, is meant to still all of the samskaras. And so maybe what has been happening for you is that you cleaned out your negative samskaras through the practice of yoga.
Still cleaning. But
yes.
Yeah.
Still
daily
polishing.
cleaning.
But getting a little clearer.
Yeah.
Well, you get a task rabbit to do all the cleaning, you know, for your samskara.
Yeah.
Shoshanga. That's a rabbit in Sanskrit.
Oh, cool. Shoshanga. Tasks Shoshanga.
Yeah.
It's a new app, you know, they do everything.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty cool. So earlier, you were saying something about vinyasa sequence, right? So we brushed a little bit upon like Ashtanga and what like it is in a way. We all practice Ashtanga here. So
Giuseppe and I practice Ashtanga yoga as our regular daily practice, but I'm sure there are lots of people that don't.
So what's up with this vinyasa sequence, and you know, what do we do every day?
You practice Ashtanga, yes?
I do. Ashtanga is my daily practice as well, too.
So how would you describe it to people that don't know about Ashtanga?
I typically like to describe it as a moving meditation.
I love that.
Maybe not always, but that's kind of what we're going for.
Yeah.
And for me, again, it had been the first kind of practice I had done where that really started to actually happen. It's this kind of magic combination of breath, looking place, and kind of bandha and postures, this Tristana method that really kind of brings everything together and focuses you in a way that, you know, I don't think I've ever experienced from anything else. You know, the first training that I had done was in classical hatha, which was also amazing, and I still, and meditation, which was important for me. But it's, you know, I think as Westerners especially, and if you're working a desk job, we do have maybe a lot of energy because we're sitting around all day.
Yeah.
And Ashtanga yoga really harnesses that energy, I think, in a very positive way, so that we can kind of still move and breathe and be, but at the same time begin to draw our focus in a bit more.
Yeah, you said that something that helps you to harness the yoga and Ashtanga is the Tristana method. So how would you define that?
So I've heard it described a few different ways, but usually it's breath, doing the ujjayi, even inhalation, even exhalation, breathing, bandha, or some people say asana or posture, but kind of the movements we're making with our body. And then also the drishti, or looking place, as well too. And those three aspects together. I was even reading yesterday online, they've done a few kind of scientific studies on the benefits of Ashtanga yoga particularly. And they did tie in how it was the fact that this practice, out of all the other ones, really uses these three key elements, and how beneficial it really has proven to be. So,
yeah, I mean, Eddie's book is really like on the scientific evidence for, the practice. And he goes into a lot of details and a lot of, scientific stuff that's interesting because it supports something that, if you think about it, was maybe made like instinctively by, whoever created yoga or whoever made this whole thing possible, or even the sequence that, Pattabhi Jois and Krishnamacharya came up with. And it's interesting to support it with like actual scientific evidence, for us, Westerners.
Yeah, and I would say even at least the yoga in general can be referred to as a science, and I like to look at it that way as well too. And in the West, we of course love the science stuff as well too. But I'm doing this online course as well on yoga, philosophy, science, and religion. And they were saying, okay, what makes a scientific view? And a big part of that is if there's a testable kind of thing that you can do there. And everything in yoga is based on experience and what we can physically experience, and it's been tested and proven. So it is, to a certain extent, science.
Yes.
Isn't it amazing to just be a student like your whole life? Like we were saying, being a shishya your whole life. Isn't that like what we're sort of like here for?
Laura is also Shishya. Yes,
totally.
Shishya's only on the podcast.
Yeah, otherwise out. We're not inclusive. No.
Always a student.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I mean, we touched upon breath a lot, and I keep on looking at Lino's book right there, which is called Ashtanga Yoga, the Yoga of Breath. And I was looking, I remember like reading Yogananda's book as well. And breath is like the most magical thing there is, because it's like the link between your body and your soul and your mind. Mm-hmm. And like, Sadhguru says, don't breath, no life. It's simple. It's the thing that if you master it, maybe you can master what it is that this existence means, or something like that. What do you guys think?
Completely. I even remember, this is odd, but I remember as a child, they say in the Gita that it's having practiced yoga in previous lives kind of brings us to it now. And I had just very bizarre things as a child that I really think brought me to yoga as well too. And one of them was just being really fascinated by breathing and the breath and what we're breathing in. And I remember that from a very early age. But I will say it's still probably one of the biggest things I struggle with in the practice.
Yeah.
I broke my nose in college and didn't do anything about it. I've got a deviated septum, allergies and stuff too. So there are days when like that's like a hard part for me. And it's never been, it's still the most fascinating part, I would say. And the fact that I think it's these challenges that really help ignite further inquiry as well too into it, and make me stronger and everyone stronger in the end as well too. So whether or not it's difficult or not, it's okay.
Exactly.
It's just as long as we're moving and breathing and here and going with emotions, that's all that matters. So.
Yeah, I would say that breath is actually the most important component of yoga practice, and that's one of the ways in which I have taken it off of the mat and like heightened my awareness in my life, because the breath regulates the nervous system, and it's also the only process in the human body that is naturally unconscious that we can make conscious. So it is the bridge between the conscious and the unconscious self.
Interesting.
And as a mental health clinician, I watch people's frantic breathing all the time. I watch people shutting down their own breath, people who have been chronically hardened so that they no longer can breathe deeply. And I witness the psychological effects that cause breath withholding. And so yoga, asana, and pranayama, which is the fourth limb, which is essentially breath regulation, can reverse the psychological effects through starting with the breath. So in yoga, we try to have even inhale and even exhale, or we'll do certain breath practices. And by doing this, you know, if you're anxious and you quit breathing and you don't even notice it, and then you go to a yoga class and you are forced to deepen your breath, then you are forced to relax.
Yeah.
And perhaps this is why people like it, because it's the one spot where they're being put in a relaxed state because the rest of their lives are running around not breathing.
I was reading about something similar, about like Shirshasana, which is the headstand, right?
Yep.
When you do that, automatically your heart rate slows down a lot. So that makes your breathing slow down a lot. So that kind of stills your mind.
Yes.
That's why, you know, somebody calls it the king of all poses or something like that. So it's interesting because, you know, we just go back, you know, scientifically, you know, your legs are up, heart rate goes down, breathing goes down, mind calms. But then the rishis did that, you know, thousands of years ago. And it's, yeah, I find that fascinating, you know, that bridge between, you know, something that's thousands of years old and, you know, how do you explain it nowadays with like Western, and now that the yoga is like worldwide and it's a huge mainstream, can we call it, phenomenon? And like all these people that we think about, you know, Guruji, Iyengar, Lino, Eddie, all these great, amazing teachers, they went into the unknown, you know, when they all started, you know, what is it, 50, 60 years ago, 70 years ago.
I would argue that it wasn't actually even unknown 50 or 60 years ago. I would argue that the Yoga Sutras were handed to us by Patanjali and essentially from Lord Shiva bajillions of years ago.
And that is connected to our logo, you know, a little bit.
Aww.
Yeah.
Because we have Shesha.
It was so funny. The last course in Greece, there were snakes everywhere.
Amazing.
But I named the two in our yard.
How?
I did Adi for Adishesha. And then I think we found a female as well, too. I'm trying to remember what I named her. I'll have to think about it if it comes to me. But it was very cute.
Yeah.
I think our good sign. Yeah.
Who's Adi Shesha? Laura. Laura's a Hindu philosophy teacher.
Adishesha is one of the vehicles of Lord Vishnu, the thousand-headed serpent. So if you practice Ashtanga, we kind of mention him in the opening mantra as well too. But he's kind of the embodiment also of like how posture should be too, which I think is really cool. And you know, Vishnu is said to be quite heavy at times. Like he can jump over several worlds in one step. But as a bed as well too, he's also got to be comfortable. So he needs to be both strong and steady as well as comfortable. So kind of really embodying what the kind of
proper
ideal posture would be within asana practice. I also, for some reason, just find all of the little heads quite cute.
I know.
It's a very, very cute image. I think I'm the only one that thinks that.
I think it's cute.
No, we got an amazing logo by Lena. So shout out to Lena.
It's beautiful.
For taking care of us. Awesome. Well, guys, I think we covered a bunch of things.
Yeah.
So we let it sit for a second. Hopefully whoever listened enjoyed it and maybe got inspiration to, you know, further deepen their studies. And that's our goal.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Laura.
Thanks, Laura.
Thanks for having me.
Really pleasure.
Yeah.
All right. See you guys next time.
Mm-hmm.